informed comment. If you are interested, you can find them on Professor Cole's personal weblog, which is called Informed Comment, juancole.com. Now we're going to open the mic and take your questions. I would appreciate if you would address your questions to a specific member of the panel. Please line up.
Is there any theoretical Islamic juridical dispute between Ahmadinejad and Khomeini, or is it just political, or is it just a political conflict? Professor Cole, I guess.
Yeah, actually, we have the horse's mouth here. Would you like to talk about that? Yeah, why not? He's asking about whether there's an ideological debate between Ahmadinejad and Khomeini.
I do not.
The other one's working.
This one's on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the other one is working.
Ahmadinejad is a popular president. I do not think that he has any ideology, or I do not understand his ideology. It's the same with most of Iranians. Iranians call him selected president. It means that he was not elected president. He was selected by the leader, and now also the leader understood that he made a mistake. And after, I think, less than 7 months, 8 months, there will be another election. At the beginning, Ahmadinejad said that I'm follower of Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, the clergy in seminary, the hardliner clergy. But after some times, also Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi denied he did not like Ahmadinejad. So because of it, I told you, I do not know any ideology for him. Sorry.
Next question.
I think as the different panelists were speaking, one thing came across, that there seems to be many parallels between the hierarchy of the Shia clergies and the Catholic Church. So I would like to hear the comments of each of the speakers to see, what their take is on it, because, like for instance, we say election of the Pope, but it's not really an election, it's really a selection. There are 13 people and they get together and, one person is selected.
Your question, you're asking the panelists to address the similarities and differences between Shiite clerical hierarchy and the pontifical hierarchy in the Catholic Church, right? Let's begin with Professor Mottahedeh.
And what's the play of father and dominion? Because the Catholic hierarchy has got several leaders, say in Africa.
Right, I understand that. So let's see how specific the panelists would like to get on this.
So, the Shiite religious authorities are not hierarchical in the way that the Catholic Church is. It's a much more fluid kind of structure, if it's a structure at all. So, individuals choose which of the clergymen they want to choose, want to follow, and then the clergy themselves will defer to someone that they respect and so forth. It's really a little bit more like the system among televangelists. I mean, who is the most popular preacher on TV is the one that has the most followers and so forth. There is that aspect to it, although you couldn't get any place just by being a popular preacher. You'd also have to write the kind of books that would attract the esteem of one's peers. But there's no appointment. You know, Sistani got to be where he is over time by kind of politics of reputation. There was never any moment at which there was an election or as a selection either. In the Khomeinist system, there is a more formal selection process. And maybe that's a little bit more like, the Khomeinist system is a little bit more like Catholicism in the sense that there's a supreme leader, and he's, in his own mind at least, often considered unchallengeable, and so forth. But even then, I think the big difference between Islam and Roman Catholicism is that Roman Catholicism is an institutionalized hierarchical church. And you just don't have that church-like structure in Islam. It's much more personalistic and fluid and changing.
Thank you. Professor Kadivar, would you like to comment on that? Would you like to add anything?
There are different approaches among Shias. One of it is close to Roman Catholicism, and another is against it. The first approach is the leader, and I think I want to distinguish between choosing the leader and selecting the Shia authority, Marja' Taqlid. I think it's two different cases. To choose the leader according to Iranian constitution, it should be selected, or it should be elected by the committee of the experts, or Majlis al-Khubra or Majlis al-Khubara. It's something like the cardinals among the Catholics. So it means, and also these cardinals or these experts are elected by the people, elected by the citizens. It should be in this way, but actually, really, the leader selected the members of this parliament, the member of this Supreme Court, the member of Majlis al-Khubara. Another approach is the leader is not the representative of the seminary, is not representative of his clergy. The seminary should be under power of the leader. We have these two approaches in Iran. For example, Kehan Daily is the representative of hardliners. It means that the leader should be above the seminary. The seminary should follow the leader. But the other fundamentalists in Iran, the same, or traditionalists, that the daily Risalat is its representative, they believe that the leader is the representative of seminary. So it's completely two different approaches. And the third approach is what Ayatollah Muntaziri, last Ayatollah Muntaziri said, and Ayatollah Sistani also said the same thing. And before Sistani, Muntaziri, in his final theory, mentioned that, and also it's in Iranian constitution, there is an article that the leader is the representative of the citizen, not the representative of seminary or clergy. So it means that it's some kind of representation, and it's very close to democracy. So we have three different approaches among contemporary Shias.
Thank you. Professor Mottahedeh, would you like to comment on that? No. Next question.
I would like to thank the speakers for coming here today. For any student of Islamic studies, this is a serious all-star lineup. So my question is slightly timely with Ashura in about a few weeks. My question is, what do events like the Battle of Karbala or the occultation of the 12th Imam serve in terms of a historical, philosophical, or even as an allegory, as the foundation for some of these modern, postmodern theories in terms of the way in which jurisprudence, politics, and theology, mingle. And a lot of other historical philosophers of Shiism have argued that, events like the Battle of Karbala highlight the separation between the political power and the juridical or even theological power in proto-Sunni theology or Sunni orthodoxy. So how do these clerical figures or even juridical figures who are interested in politics use these sorts of events in the early time period of Shi'i Islam, and what sort of developments do we see in Sunni Islam today?
And do you have a preferred respondent to your question?
Probably Dr. Mottahedeh or even Dr. Kadivar, even Dr. Cole could speak. It's an all-star lineup.
Alternatives. Let me just say that Professor Cole has written among many important works, a book on modernity and the millennium, which addresses to a very large extent the kind of questions that he raised. The significance of religious ideas in Shiism in late 19th and early 20th century and their impact. So I would like to ask Professor Cole to take this question first.
Well, the sacred history in Shiism centers around the martyrdom of Imam Hossein, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. And of course, the ritual calendar of Shiism is very much focused on that as well. And the way in which that story of martyrdom and injustice is reflected in the part of the Shiite world that I was talking about in Sistani's Iraq, is that it's constantly referenced during the American occupation. And the Shiites of Iraq are inscribed on the body of Hossein. So they have been martyred by Saddam, in some cases by the Americans and British and so forth. And as Hussein made this principled stand against tyranny, so they represent themselves as standing against tyranny. So it's a way of invoking what often was a religious ritual, relatively detached from politics, for nationalist purposes and also to make claims on political leadership in post-Saddam Iraq.
Thank you, Professor Cole. In the interest of time, we have 3 questions lined up. I will move to the next question, and then later, if our panelists want to address that question of yours, we'll come back to that. Yes?
This is for Dr. Mottahedeh.
Could you speak up, please?
For Dr. Mottahedeh. So you mentioned that Hassan Ramazani was one of the first, or was the first to teach the book of Ibn Arabi. And I was wondering if there were Qumi scholars prior to him who taught Irfan in other ways, whether it was from Ibn Arabi or not. And then also, were there non-Qumi scholars who taught about Irfan in any way before this? So was this kind of the the start of Irfan within Qumi?
No. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm sure other people, my panelists, particularly Dr. Kadivar, Professor Kadivar, would know more about this, but no, from the Safavid period, when Mullah Sadra reinterpreted Ibn Arabi into Shiite terms, people have taught Ibn Arabi in Shiite circumstances, and it's really the Mullah Sadra's version that is dominant, Mullah Sadra's understanding of Nusus al-Hikam, but people go back, have since the 17th century taught this mystical philosophy, and I have to say, all parts of the Islamic world, it's a hot question. About 20 years ago, the Egyptian parliament banned Nusus al-Hikam, embezzles of wisdom, and I don't think it had any influence on anybody, but anyway. Ibn Arabi has had his following everywhere, and he's always had clerics who say this Wahdat al-Wujud or Wahdat al-Wujud is which is a pantheistic idea in some ways. He's contrary to Islamic study, Islamic understanding of Khalid al-Mahdud.
Thank you, Professor Mottahedeh.
First, I'd like to thank the entire panel. It was a very engaging event, and thank the organizers as well. My question is for Dr. Cole. You mentioned that Ayatollah Sistani specifically had called for unity between Sunnis and Shias. And Ayatollah Khamenei has also done has similar fatwas as well. Recently, at least in the past 5-6 years, there's been an increase of violence within communities from Indonesia to Malaysia to Pakistan, the list goes on, even in Palestine, targeting Shia communities. So what has been the response from the Sunni leadership to these fatwas? And has there been a back and forth? Is there some sort of reconciliation? Because the violence seems to keep on increasing globally. So.
Yeah, well, there is violence between Sunnis and Shiites, sometimes in places. Karachi has seen a wave of violence of that sort, up in Quetta as well, in Pakistan, in Iraq, of course. Although in Iraq, you have to question how much of it is Sunni Shia and how much of it is just like ex-Ba'athis, and it's ideological beyond that. I think the Syrian revolution has pitched the issue anew. So I think maybe some of the tensions were starting to die down, but now you have this kind of, even though the Ba'ath Party in Syria is not a religious party, the upper echelons of it are dominated by Alawites who are coded as a kind of Shiite. They're not usually believers or anything, but it so happens that they are coded as Shiites, and there are Salafi Sunnis in Syria who have targeted Alawites for reprisal, and then the Iranian regime and the Shiite government of Iraq has swung behind Bashar al-Assad, along with the Nipati government, which is backed by Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it looks like there's a kind of Shiite backing for the al-Assad regime at a time when Saudi Arabia and Qatar and most of the Sunni world, including the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, is more aligned with the revolutionaries. But this is a big problem. Sistani's own position has been that he saw the tactic that the radical Sunnis in Iraq developed, which was to try to foment a civil war by continually bombing the Shiites. So they would bomb their ice cream parlors and kill their kids. There would be a funeral that evening, they would bomb the funeral. They would bomb the marriages. It was a small group of people, but they were trying to get the Shiites go because they were convinced that they were a majority, and if they could throw the country into civil war, it would make it too hot for the Americans to stay. The Americans would withdraw, and then they could make a coup and come back to power. And it was a stupid theory. First of all, they're a small minority in Iraq, they're not the majority. And second of all, if they got the Shiites go, they would just be massacred, which is what actually happened. Sistani was very distressed by all this. And people would come to him among the Shiite tribes and say, our wedding was blown up, and we know which tribe did it, and we know where they live, and we want your permission to go and take revenge, because they have thar, formal kinds of feuding revenge among the tribes. And Sistani forbade them. He said, if the Sunnis kill half the Shiites in Iraq, I will not permit reprisals. And it was a very principled stand, and it actually, I think, had some impact in 2003, 4, 5, but then by 2006, nobody was paying any attention to him anymore. And by his own juridical lights, right, you shouldn't try to get out ahead of your own following. When they stopped listening to him, he withdrew. He stopped saying anything to them. And he even, for a while, he stopped seeing people at his home. And so he was very disappointed at them. And that horrible civil war, really, that occurred in 2006, 2007, where 3,000 people a day were showing up dead, and it was, neighborhoods were being ethnically cleansed. This really, really, I think, discouraged Sistani. But in recent years, he has re-emerged to be this voice for communal harmony, and he has stressed it. And he has, he has found Sunni leaders who reciprocate and who will visit him, and they will come out. But these killings are not being done by the high ulama. It's not they who are behind them.
Thank you. Now, the last question of this evening.
First of all, I'd like to thank each of the panelists for really excellent and insightful presentations. I really took a lot out of them. I'm not a student of Shia Islam or Iran, so this is a very big learning experience for me. But I wanted to pose a question for each of the panelists based on a point that Professor Cole alluded to toward the end about how one senses that the Muslim Brotherhood might be adapting or borrowing certain ideas of the guardianship of the jurist today in certain respects. And I see that with Qaradawi and his Marja'iyya, these sorts of things. And I was wondering, to what extent is the evolution of the notion of the guardianship of the jurist and Shia political and social thought, in what way does it actually communicate with the Sunni world? What's going on in the Sunni world at the same time? The repudiation of the Fusus al-Hikam, that's clearly, this is echoes of Salafi Wahhabi, thought at the time. So just briefly, if each of you could comment on what you sense is the relationship between the evolution of Shiite thought and practice in relation to the Sunni world at the same time, if there is one.
Thank you very much. That's a lengthy question. It takes a lengthy answer. We are 4 minutes after the time that we have to give up this room, but I think the question is important enough to warrant answers from all of the panelists. Professor Mottahedeh, let's begin with you.
I think that there is some similarity inside of Shia thought, as Professor Yarshatir, Sheikh of all Iranists here, as Professor Yarshatir will remember when I spoke at his seminar around the time of the Iranian Revolution, I said that the Akhbari school of will make a comeback. And that's what the Tafkikis are they have a smell of Akhbari thought around them, no doubt about it. And the epistemological point of the Tafkikis is that knowledge of the Quran and the sayings of the Imams, it has just primacy, epistemological primacy. It's true prima facie before you talk about knowledge derived from reason. They don't say there's no use to reason. They realize that, even to understand the verse of the Quran, you have to use a certain amount of reasoning. But they put this kind of knowledge prima facie, and yes, a lot of the Salafis really have the same approach. I think, this is a difficult, there is a similarity. I don't know that any specific Sunni thinker has been influential on these Tafkikis, but that may be my ignorance of them.
This Shia theory had 2 parts. The first part was implementation of Sharia. The second part was the divine right for the jurists. I think the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, in Syria, in Libya, in all these countries shared the first part, is implementation of Sharia. That some thinkers like Rashid Reza also participated in the second part. He wrote exactly what Shia authorities believe, that it's the role of the jurists or the people of the experience. It means that they have this job to select a ruler. So I think it has a lot of effect on the Sunnis, especially on the first part. I have a lot of points, but the time is over.
Thank you. Professor Cole?
Yeah, just very briefly, in Iraq, the Sunnis were at a disadvantage because they had no religious hierarchy and it was just individual preachers and they weren't organized. And they lost the Ba'ath Party, which was really what had organized them. So you see the emergence in the couple of years after the fall of Saddam of councils of Sunni clergy. And then in the newspapers, you start seeing this phrase, marja'iyya, or source of authority, which is a Shiite technical term. Now, history is long and texts are many, and I can't tell you with certainty that no Sunni has ever used the phrase marja'iyya before. But I never heard about anything like that, and I've read a lot of the text. So I think this is new. And then not only has this phrase emerged among the Sunni clergy to claim a kind of authority, analogous to what the Shiite clergy claim, but right now there's a big debate in Egypt in the framing of the new constitution that the Muslim Brotherhood wants to give the Al-Azhar seminary rights of review over legislation to make sure it's in accordance with Islam. It's the 1906 Shiite Iranian constitution.
And on that note, let's bring this evening to a close. Thank you, panelists. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bill. And please step outside. There is some refreshments being served.